I mean, even someone like Peter Jackson on Lord of the Rings, that was an incredible, it was like a gigantic, wild film school.
Hi, I'm Alex from NME, and today we're with acting legend Viggo Mortensen. Falling is your first film as a director. I imagine no one really teaches you how to do that. You just learn by doing and watching, I guess. Were there any directors who you've worked with in the past who taught you the most about how to do that job?
I learned a lot. I didn't have to learn by just doing. I mean, some things you have to experience by doing, but I've been a nosy actor for so long, that I've always been curious about from the beginning, how do you take a screenplay to the screen? And the more I worked and the more sets I was on and the more different approaches I saw from different directors and cameramen and, different departments, the more I realized that there's many ways to do it, but there are some basic things that the best of them always do, which is to prepare very thoroughly. You can never prepare too much or too early for a shoot. And the best of them tend to communicate very openly without being insecure with their crew and their cast, and are open to questions and suggestions all along the way. And so that's how I approached the making of Falling. We prepared very thoroughly, also knowing we had very little time to shoot it. It was an ambitious schedule, to say the least, because we had all those children with their limited hours, winter shoot, limited daylight hours, jumping around in different historical time periods, and we did that in 5 weeks essentially, and that's a lot to do in that time. And but by preparing thoroughly, as I'd seen others do, and also just the daily problem solving, making any movie or even making as a record, a music record, is about solving problems. Little ones, big ones, all along the way. It's just an obstacle course, really. And then you get to the end of it, you're like, oh, it's done. We have it. We've made it. You're sort of surprised. And, even someone like Peter Jackson on Lord of the Rings, that was an incredible, it was like a gigantic, wild film school, in that every day, Peter and his, anywhere from 200 to 700 by the end of the shoot, when all these units were shooting, crew members, mostly Kiwis, who had not, before shooting that trilogy, had any experience with a giant undertaking like that. And very few of them had a significant amount of film work behind them and some TV work and so forth. And many of them were total neophytes. But everybody became seasoned. Everybody under Peter Jackson's direction and guidance, they collectively solved so many problems in so many creative ways, inventing shots, doing things that nobody thought of before, little problems and big problems, logistic problems every day. That was amazing. And that taught me a lot as well. So, but all these directors I've been lucky to work with, whether it's David Cronenberg or Jane Campion or Matt Ross, Pete Farrelly, all of them, as different as they all might be, Lisandro Alonso, David Olhoffen and people from different countries, different cultures, different artistic backgrounds, different approaches to film storytelling. They all had certain things in common that I've mentioned, the preparation, the communication throughout, and the hands-on quality, like being there, being present in the editing, being present for everything, really watching and learning from the movie they were making, letting the images speak to them as to how they should be used, how they should be scored, how they should, everything.
Yeah. And not just directing, I think you also wrote and recorded the music yourself for the film. Is that right?
Yeah.
But what instruments do you play? I think it's quite a few, isn't it?
No, in the score is piano and guitar, essentially. Okay. And also guitar effects and some piano effects that you might not realize that are part of the score, but they're there in a subtle way throughout.
At the moment in London, we're in a lockdown. I think in America, whereabouts you are, you've spent at least some time in lockdown this year. Are there any albums or is there any music that you've been going back to listening to during that time?
Yeah, I don't know. I've just I've mostly been watching movies and reading books, and I've been writing. I've written a couple of screenplays, but sometimes to accompany me, I've listened to a lot of, I don't know why, I was just drawn to listen to older records, older like blues records and, American bluegrass recordings from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and also flamenco music, which is really the Spanish blues. Yeah. And then also while writing the screenplays, I've been listening to, classical music, a mixture of things. There hasn't been like one record that I listen to over and over.
Yeah, yeah. Is there a musician that you'd like to play in a biopic? Someone who's had a really interesting life?
The one musician, and I tried, this was, probably 20 years ago, I tried to get the rights to his life story, and I probably should have just gone and tried to make the movie somehow anyway, without permission. I don't know, change the names or something. But I wanted to make a movie about Chet Baker. But then I saw the one recently, that Ethan Hawke did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that he did a really good job on that. And the story I wanted to tell was, he, as you probably know, he died. He probably was, doped up and, passed out. But he fell out of a window in I think Amsterdam somewhere. And that's how he died, right? And I wanted to make a movie that started with him falling out the window. And then the whole movie would happen as he was falling. And it would end with him hitting the ground or something. That was the story I had.
And it would have been called Falling.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what I was going to call it. But that was a story. I wrote it as a story, and I thought I could make this into a screenplay. And then somebody said to me, I think it was a lawyer, said, well, you can't really do this unless you have the rights, blah, 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 from the estate. And I was like, forget about it. And I actually looked into it. And I think at that time, some other actor, I think it was Leonardo DiCaprio or somebody, had the rights to it. So I thought, so I just moved on. But that's the only one I can think of that I've wanted to.
You've ridden horses in a lot of movies, but in the one film that you had final say on, Falling, as director, and which has loads of horses in, you didn't go near one. Was that kind of a coincidental, or you just had enough of riding horses in films?
No, I like them, but it was in this story, the horses are important to the family, but especially to Willis. It's his place where he's happy, and you can see that visibly towards the end of the movie. These horses he's been talking about and even complaining about, the way he touches them and the way he cares for them in a sort of offhand way, but you can see how much they mean to him and how that's his place in the world. And my character just sort of observes it, even though he feels his dad should be recovering from his operation and should just stay inside, shouldn't be out in the freezing cold, feeding horses and letting them out of the barn and all that stuff out in the snow. He can see that his father is truly in his place at home, in his special place. And so I'm just a bystander taking it in. And you see my character when he's younger riding with his father. It's not a great memory, but the setting is beautiful and the horses are nice, but then things kind of turn sour by that scene, of course.
The film ends with a dedication to Charles and Walter Mortensen, I think. Can you tell me a bit about who they are? Obviously, they must be related to you, but beyond that.
They're my brothers. We're three brothers. I'm the eldest. And it was out of respect for them, even though the story is essentially a fiction. It's a fictional family. There are certain snippets of conversation, certain aspects of the dynamic between the father and mother in the flashback scenes, even some moments in terms of the depiction of dementia in the character of Willis, played by Lance Henriksen, that would remind them of things in our family or our shared family history. And so just out of respect for them, I dedicated it to the two of them because they share in part my story, even though I was older and some of the events like the duck hunting things, some of that is taken from real, unlike most of the movie, that comes from some real experiences I had when I was 4 years old, before they would, not something they remember, but I do. But other things about the father figure, the mother figure, certain little details they would realize I'd taken from our shared experience.
Well, thanks so much. I'll let you go or you'll be here all day. But thanks so much for chatting to me.
Thanks for your questions.